Welcome back to the McConnell Center series, Why You Should Read. Today, it's a great privilege to host at the McConnell Center one of our dear friends, John D. Wilsey, who is professor of church history and philosophy and chair of the Department of Church History at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's the author, most recently, of God's Cold Warrior, The Life and Faith of John Foster Dulles. And perhaps by the time you listen to this today, he will also be the author of Religious Freedom, a Conservative Primer. But today, he is here to talk about Edith Hamilton's classic, The Greek Way. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you John Wilsey.
Thanks, man. Well, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it is that you're watching this. And it's a pleasure to be with you all today to talk about Edith Hamilton's book, The Greek Way. And thanks so much to my good friend Gary Gregg and the McConnell Center for allowing me to spend some time with you to talk about Edith Hamilton and to talk about the Greek Way. Edith Hamilton was a classicist of the late 19th and 20th centuries. She's a very interesting lady. She was born in Dresden, Germany in 1867. And she grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, from the age of 2 on through. She received her AB and her AM from Bryn Mawr College in 1894. She was the eldest of 4 daughters and a younger brother. So this little boy, her brother, grew up as the youngest of 5 children and had 4 older sisters. After she finished her AM and her AB at Bryn Mawr, she traveled across the Atlantic to go study in Germany, to study for the PhD. But she ended up coming back to America in order to take up the post of headmistress of Bryn Mawr School, just outside of Baltimore, which was the very first college prep school for girls. She served in that post from 1896 until she retired in 1922. And when she retired, she became an author. She insisted on the fact that she was not a scholar. She was a popularizer, and she sought to bring the great tragedians. She sought to bring Roman thinkers, philosophers, historians, and Greek and Roman culture to a broad audience. She also wrote a couple of books on the Hebrew prophets and on the New Testament. A couple of her books that she wrote over the course of her writing career. She, of course, wrote The Greek Way in 1930. She wrote another book called The Roman Way in 1932, a book called The Prophets of Israel in 1936. She's probably most known for her book entitled Mythology that she wrote in 1942, that was probably her bestseller. And in 1961, she put together a volume entitled The Collected Works of Plato, which is a wonderful edition. And in 1957, when she was 90 years old, she was made an honorary citizen of Athens. She died in 1963. Now, why should you read The Greek Way? I have 3 particular reasons why I think you should get The Greek Way and read it. There are probably a lot of other reasons why you should read The Greek Way, but here are my 3 reasons. I should just say, as a little word of introduction, I first read The Greek Way when I was in college. My grandfather loved Edith Hamilton and had all of her books, and he encouraged me to read The Greek Way. And I read it when I was just a young man. And over the course of the years, I think I've probably reread The Greek Way 3 or 4 times. It's one of my favorite books, and it is dear to me, not just because of what the book, what Hamilton says in the book, but also because my grandfather loved it and handed it down to me. Now, my 3 reasons for why you should read The Greek Way. First is that Hamilton notes that the ancient Greeks saw unity between mind and spirit, reason and feeling, and art and science. The Greeks did not see these things being in conflict with one another. They saw these things being in harmony with one another, and it's reflected in their culture and in their ways of life. For example, Edith Hamilton notes that the Greeks were the first civilization to play and to value play for the sake of play. That they loved beauty and they loved goodness for the sake of beauty and goodness. And we see these features of their culture and their mindset in their games and in their art and in their sculpture. I think about the frescoes that are painted in various parts of the Greek world, especially as early as the Minoan civilization. The Minoans painted scenes of pretty women and beautiful fish and the beautiful ocean, the movement of the waves. They were not gods and goddesses. It was not a painting of the gods of the sea or anything like that. They were just paintings of beautiful things and beautiful creatures. Edith Hamilton noted that in Greece, theaters proliferated, whereas in Egypt, tombs proliferated. And she tried to draw a contrast. I think she made a very stark contrast between Egypt and Greece in that regard. She noticed that they rejoiced in life because they recognized that life was both sweet on the one hand, and it could also be bitter on the other. Joy and sorrow, exaltation and tragedy, gain and loss were both real realities. They were both palpable in the experience of living, and thus they should both be embraced. And this is an example of how the Greeks saw sometimes things that were in tension together, that were in a unity. They were able to enjoy the sweetness of life more deeply because they had felt the bitterness of life. Another aspect of this is that the Greeks embraced freedom of thought and expression. And Hamilton notes that they're the first civilization to do so. Their emphasis on freedom of thought and freedom of expression sprang from an intense curiosity about the world and about about reality. And that's, of course, evidenced in the founding of philosophy and science and schools in Greece, in the ancient world. All reality, the Greeks believed, exhibited truth and beauty. They did not see conclusions reached by the mind as mutually exclusive to conclusions reached by the spirit, as we often do today. So that's the first reason. The second reason I would say you should read Hamilton is that she identified the Greeks as the first to demonstrate the significance of human life through tragedy. She was a translator of the Greek tragedies, the Greek plays by Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides. The Greeks, particularly those three tragedians, taught through their plays the great truth that dignity of the human person is brought into the starkest relief through pain and suffering, through tragedy. Now, we moderns, we seek avoidance or mitigation of pain, and we seek to avoid those things. We look at tragedy as similar or the same as what Hamilton called pathos, but she said the Greeks differentiated between tragedy and pathos. Tragedy is meaningful because it bears on those who feel deeply, who partake of life as it is meant to be lived, with the virtues of courage and justice and wisdom and decorum. So an example of this is that more recently, after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy gave Robert Kennedy a copy of The Greek Way by Edith Hamilton. She was a fan of Edith Hamilton's work, and Robert Kennedy read The Greek Way, and he also read very deeply from her translations of the Greek tragedies. And it was through Hamilton's analysis of the Greeks and her translation of those Greek tragedians that Robert Kennedy began to make sense of something that was very senseless, the death of his brother through assassination. Thirdly and lastly, why you should read Hamilton's The Greek Way. Hamilton presents the Greeks as a people of balance, in contrast to our modern tendencies towards imbalance. And she pointed out several different examples of this in their culture. Balance between law on the one hand and freedom on the other. Balance between faith and science. Balance between the general and the particular in ideas. Balance between beauty and goodness in art, in architecture, in morals, and in literature. Balance between objective reality and subjective perception. A balance between public interests and private interests. And lastly, a balance between the individual needs and desires with the corporate needs and desires. Hamilton said that the Greeks saw particulars as parts of a whole. They didn't see particulars as individual entities existing for their own sake. So if we took that view, we would see that particular things, particular individuals, particular parts of any whole are in harmony together in order to make up that whole. They're not in endless conflict. And that is what marks the Greek mind. The harmony of the parts of the human person, for example, make the person greater than the sum of his or her parts. And so the dignity of the human life was at the center of the Greek way. So those three things, that there's a balance, or that there is a unity, I should say, between mind and spirit, that there is deep significance in human life, and that's seen through tragedy, and that the Greek people were a people of balance, balancing particular with the general, in contrast to our tendency towards imbalance. And these are reasons that I would commend the Greek way to you. Thanks very much.